Hello everyone, my name is Professor O, and today I will be starting my class, David Lynch 1001. This is a course I will be dedicating to the late great artist known as David Keith Lynch, who passed away a little over a year ago and would have been 80 this week. He's my favorite artist of all time, and I hope that he will become someone you are fond of as I go on to teach you all about him. This isn't your average 101 course, instead a 1001 course. This is something I will be teaching over the entire year. Every third Thursday, every 3 weeks, starting today, I will be telling you all about the art and life of this guy you see right here. He's incredibly unique, incredibly special, and missed dearly by me and many others. Us nerds who love the surreal, abstract, and just plain weird are really in loss of something who did something really unflinching when he put out all his 10 films, all of his music, all of his visual art, each and every piece. He's truly special, and I wanted to express that here with you. I wanted to immortalize him as he deserves to be immortalized. I went into quite a depression when he passed away a year ago. I would just repeat to my loved ones, David Lynch is dead. I would despair over that. And I wanted to make something of that love I have for him. That love I can no longer truly give to a man that is gone from us. So, I'm turning all of that sadness into something. This class I bring to you for free, because I believe that this sort of education should go up on YouTube for anyone to see. He deserves it. So, without further ado, I'm going to give you a short introduction to the character of this man. With this sculpture, Eat My Fear, which is of a cow that he was gifted from the state of New York for their cow parade, which they would give out to a sort of public exhibition that would give people a sense of the culture of New York and all the different artists and brands within it. However, David Lynch's was never actually accepted because you can see it's very gory, disturbing, and grotesque. The morbidity of such a thing really encapsulates how he would do whatever he wants. His attitude is something that is one of my favorite things about him. Of course, there are a couple incidences, be it his adaptation of Dune, or some of his experience making Twin Peaks, where he would have to oblige to the demands of others. But after those experiences, he would learn that he would need Final Cut for all of his films. He would do all of the decision-making because he's a true artist. And with a true artist such as that, his catalog of almost 80 years of life would include pieces such as this, which is something I wouldn't even know about until his passing, when a YouTuber I watch, Broy Deschanel, aka Maya, would cover this as really an encapsulation of all of what I just said. It's something that goes to show how he would do anything, at any point, just because he wanted to. He had the vision. And I keep learning things about him. I don't stop learning things about him. I hope that even if you know and love this man, you can even learn a little something about him. Because this is a course I will be running through 16 total modules. You've got the module subjects on the left, and we've got the required viewing and listening on the right. Refer back to this page whenever we're going through our different subjects and you want to know what you must go to in lieu of a specific topic. We have optional things that you can pursue as you would like. But to really get started, we're going to point you in the direction of this video I love, David Lynch being a madman for 8 minutes and 30 seconds, for a relentless 8 minutes and 30 seconds, excuse me. It's edited together by this YouTuber known as Cosmavoid, and it's something I use to teach anyone about David Lynch when I'm just getting started, to try and show them what is so special about this guy, because there really is a lot. And a video like this, even in an 8 minute and 30 second interval, will show what is kind of silly and goofy on the surface, but delves into something profound by the end. He's an ideas man, and a lot of his ideas get expressed in there, and I really want you all to see that, just as I have shown many other friends and loved ones in my life. If you wanted to, you can also pursue his WikiArt page, which includes some pieces I won't even be including in this here video, which will be discussing his painting. But on the left, we've got all these different things that not just encapsulate his feature-length films, from Eraserhead to Inland Empire, but his TV projects, Twin Peaks, and his music, Floating into the Night with Julie Cruz, Thought Gang with Angelo Badalamenti, and songs such as I'm Waiting Here, penned with Licky Lee and Dean Hurley. Now we've got all these different things I mentioned that are completely optional. You've got videos on YouTube such as David Lynch and Dune by a YouTuber named Forgotten Real. It's a quite underrated video encapsulating how he would have to compromise on his vision, ultimately teaching him a lesson and being uncompromising. We've got lost scenes that you don't necessarily have to watch but can add to the world if you want. We've got short films, this here stage performance called Industrial Symphony No. 1. This will help teach you about all the different things he would do beyond what is known as his most popular form of art, film. But I would like for all of you to follow these as we sort of analyze these and delve into these and just avoid spoiling you on the joy of this. Of course, the joy of David Lynch is finding out some of these things for yourself. You don't want someone to explain away all of this. You want to, in a way, seek this out for yourself. So if you want to know a lot of the sourcing of this information I bring to you, I recommend, first and foremost, these two books, Lynch and Lynch by Chris Rodley. It's an interview series with Lynch. It was from the late 90s, I believe. And then we've got Room to Dream, a 2018 book, which is by biographer Christine McKenna and David Lynch. Christine McKenna, which I will read a quote from in just a second, is a interviewer who had been doing stuff with David Lynch since 1980, before his second feature, The Elephant Man. This is a biography that delves into more than any other biography I know of. There's an audiobook version, which I recommend very much. You can find a link to a free trial of Barnes & Noble audiobook versions that includes this book, and I would like, if anyone wants to know more about Lynch, and especially his early life, his childhood, to check this all out, because that is the longest chapter in this book, and it's so beautiful and how it actually uses narration from the authors. They do a great job, especially David Lynch, as he's just a wonderful storyteller. You'll come to see that in clips I show in this video, in fact. But as they say in the novel, human consciousness is too vast to fit between the covers of a book, and every experience has too many facets to count. We aim to be definitive, but it's still merely a glimpse. Christine McKenna, 2018. I want to point you in the direction of these links, the archive page for Lynch on Lynch and Room to Dream, as well as, of course, David Lynch being Madman for a relentless 8 minutes and 30 seconds in the description, because there is much more than I could fit, even in a course that seeks to call itself 1001, not just 101. There's also the 26 documentary film, The Art Life, which is by directors Rick Barnes, Olivia Newgard-Holm, and John Nguyen. It has tons of his original art and paintings, because, as we will delve into, that is his first love when he became a member of the Art Life. So go ahead and seek that out if you want to see him in his studio. Pictures on the left and right detail that, but I would love if any viewer of this is motivated to check him out in action. So let's get started. The childhood of Lynch starts when he was born in Missoula, Montana. He would also go on to live in places such as Sandpoint, Idaho, Spokane, Washington, Durham, North Carolina, Boise, Idaho, and then Alexandria, Virginia. This is because Lynch's father, Donald Lynch, was a worker for the government. In fact, he worked for the United States Department of Agriculture. This meant that he was a big fan of nature, most specifically wood and trees, all that sort of stuff. It would start a sort of theme in Lynch's work. But besides his father, we've also got his mother, Edwina Lynch, also known as Edwina Sunny Sunholm. And with them, they didn't just have Lynch as their first child, but John, Lynch's younger brother, and Martha, Lynch's younger sister. Here they are pictured all together. Now, I would like to cover how Lynch had a very happy childhood. Despite moving through all these places, he would be very sociable. He would have no problem making friends because of his personality. His charm is everything. He was a child to two very loving parents and grandparents that were very caring as well, on either side. He talks about that a lot in his biography. So I would like to touch on a couple stories here, namely the fact that he was an artist from very early on. There is the fact that he was not allowed to use coloring books, which, his younger siblings would be allowed to use. I'll elaborate further with a quote from the man. "When I was little, I used to draw and paint all the time. One thing I thank my mother for is that she refused to give me coloring books because it's like a restricting thing. And my father, working for the government, had reams of paper that he'd bring home. I mostly drew ammunition and pistols and airplanes because the war was just over. And this was, I guess, in the air still. I had my own helmet and an army belt in the canteen. And these wooden rifles. You can see a little picture below. And I would draw them because they were part of my world. I mostly drew Browning automatic water-cooled submachine guns. That was a favorite." So as you can see, in post-World War II times, things were pretty bright for a white boy living in rural countries, just trying to explore his own little sense of happiness, which would include morbid little things, such as these weapons. That would actually become a theme in his work, as we'll sort of find out. Violence is a key point in his movies. But beyond that, we should focus on, again, his sociability. He would become his 7th grade class president. We've got a little baby photo of him. He would sort of be a ladies' man as well. He would go on to have 4 wives. But even at this age, he would have girlfriends since kindergarten. He would kiss every girl on this little tractor ride they had near this same time of 7th grade. All these different things. We'll add on to this in a little bit, as we'll show that he was his high school treasurer. All those sorts of things. He was very involved in the world of people. But sometimes he would have very dark experiences growing up in the suburbs. I wanted to touch on this very iconic story of his because it encapsulates a lot of the themes that would go on to define his art, a lot of the surreality. So, without further ado, I give you a little clip from the art life, uploaded to YouTube as Midnight Childhood Story. Here we are.
One night, I kind of had the feeling it was in the fall, and it was pretty late. Usually, my father would go outside and yell, "John, David!" And that would bring us home. But this night, it must have been, I don't know, close to that time. It seemed to be pretty late. I don't know what we were doing, but from across Shoshone Avenue, out of the darkness comes this, like, kind of like a strangest dream. Because I'd never seen an adult woman naked. And she had beautiful, pale white skin. And she was completely naked. And I think her mouth was bloodied. And she kind of came walking strangely across Shoshone and came into Park Circle Drive. And it seemed like she was sort of like a giant. And she came closer and closer, and my brother started to cry. Something was bad wrong with her. And I don't know what happened, but I think she sat down on a curb crying.
Disturbing story,
but it was very mysterious. Like we were seeing.
Which is about when he was a Boy Scout. Yay! When there was some press coverage for Wild at Heart, his 1990 film, he would describe himself Eagle Scout, Missoula, Montana. It's this silly little descriptor because it's a part of his life that he would say he would really only do to make his father proud. You can see this little picture on the right from cracked.com that says he achieved the rank of Eagle Scout. So the highest rank of Boy Scout, for those who don't know. The director even got to participate in John F. Kennedy's presidential inauguration with his troop, where he saw Presidents Eisenhower, Kennedy, Nixon, and Johnson drive by. He would sneak by to get a closer view, and a Secret Service agent would let him in. When he recalled, they were 10 inches away from my face. It was a great, great experience. This really also characterizes the time period he grew up in. He's a very 50s boy at heart. There is a story that this reminds me of from Room to Dream and many other retellings, where this girl he knew, named Judy, would be someone he knew after, he was one of the first to find out this news. Being the high school treasurer, he was just working on a display case, but he found her soon after, and she was really distraught. She was grieving this for a while, 4 whole days. They were referred to as the 4 dark days in American history. And I feel that in my own way with David Lynch, as I was in a lot of grief when he first passed. I had my own 4 dark days, but he's no John F. Kennedy in terms of influence on the country. It's just that he's very important to people that are just as nerdy as I. And I'm sure a lot of people who are already fans of him relate to me on that. But besides from that, I'd like to move on to his high school experience, for which he wouldn't really have the greatest time. He would go on to say, "I fucking hate high school." In fact, it was really a miserable time. In 9th grade, he would describe as the worst year of his life. He had no idea where he was going. He wouldn't know what sort of path he would choose in life. He was thinking of going in the realm of science, but the thing is with that, it was mainly just after his father and his interest in nature. So there wasn't a lot of true direction or passion or anything. So in this time, it would really just be dark for him and remind him of school not giving him a lot of motivation, or motivation for his own interests. Luckily that would resolve itself, but for now he would immerse himself in the culture of the Beat Generation. This was the sort of characterization of post-World War II youths who would be quite miscreant in this behavior of counterculturalism, art, and drugs. It would be led by beat writers, a term that was birthed by this writer in the bottom left, Jack Kerouac. with Jack Kerouac. His definition was to describe the art scene, but Beatnik would go on to really be disparaging towards these youths, as they wouldn't really have as much ability to take things seriously with everything in World War II, making things a little more dark for their own sense of perception. A lot of terrible atrocities were still in the air, and they would hang out in clubs not too dissimilar from this up on the left. No connection to Lynch specifically, but we can see photography of him in freshman year, also advertising the fact that he was his high school treasurer. Beyond that, he would start smoking at this age, and that would start cigarettes as being a theme in his work, but also fire in general being a theme in his work. But at this time, his mother would repeat that she was very disappointed in him, which, with all this behavior trying to disobey that, it's understandable. This is also what I call the Bongo Dave era, because when he spent time in those Beat Generation clubs, he would start his first instrument, the bongo drums, giving him the nickname Bongo Dave. In this same time, I give you this little clip where he would find some moment that would change his life forever. One fateful night that I will give to you in clip form. This is a interview clip I've sourced, and you can find another link to in the description. I'll play it in its entirety. You all enjoy.
I always loved to paint and draw. I felt like this was the life of a painter. I didn't ever think that an adult could be a painter. I never really, I guess, thought about it, but I was on the front yard of my girlfriend's house at night, and I met there a kid who was not going to my high school, but I was in the 9th grade, I think, and he was going to a private school, but I was meeting him for the first time in this front yard on the grass, and we started talking, and during the talk he happened to tell me his father was a painter. And at first I thought maybe a house painter. Then he said, no, a fine art painter. And a bomb went off in my head. Literally, it was like I had signed up for science, classes in math stuff in high school. And in a millisecond, way less than a full second, I only wanted to be a painter after I heard that. It gave me permission, and I knew that was it, and that's all I wanted from that second on. And I got him to take me to his father's studio, which at that time was over in Georgetown. I was this was in Virginia, where I was going to high school. So, and Bushnell Keeler was his father, and my friend's name was Toby. So he took me over to Bushnell's place. It was the real deal studio. I fell madly in love, and that was it.
Right. Well, as you've just found out, a very key door was opened up by the man you'll find in this next slide, Bushnell Keeler. Bushnell Keeler was a painter born in 1924 who passed in 2020. He was a man that was very interested in surrealism, just like David, but also did paintings of the maritime life, which will become very interesting when you see what I'll show by the end of our little demonstration today. Bushnell would give David a copy of this book you see right here, The Art Spirit by Robert Henri. And this book would teach David the value of the art life and cement to him that he could no longer turn back on his calling, which was, at this time, painting. Now, Bushnell was this figure that would go on to support him for many years, but he is often credited for being the man that made David what he is today. So everybody say thank you, Bushnell. After that, I'd like to cover the first couple of paintings we have from Lynch. A lot of misinformation says that a painting like this would be his first painting. That isn't exactly true. I don't know what his first painting was, but we can see the first sort of ideas he would cover, that being architecture and trees. Architecture would go on to be a key point for Lynch's art, the sort of set design and interesting things he would exhibit. He would have very peculiar housing throughout his life. I'm sure we'll find some time to cover that in later lessons. But for right now, I'd like to say that this is his real passion. It's coming to fruition. With all of this, we can understand that his paintings would get darker, especially when he would do his move to Philadelphia later on. But he wouldn't be alone in this dream of art. He would have his buddy Jack Fisk along for the way. Now, Jack Fisk, as you see right here, has been along with David for a very long time. They met when David was, again, in freshman year, when Jack Fisk was working a now obsolete job called the Soda Jerk, which is a play on soda clerk. The job of a soda jerk would usually go to teen boys who would sit by soda fountains and mix soda the old-fashioned way, which would mean jerking a fountain of soda water that would go into a glass. You mix that with different soda syrups and you serve it to whomever. And David over here was getting his favorite drink at the time, would go on to be one of his favorites for life, Coca-Cola. So in that moment, he lies to not Bushnell, but Jack, saying that he's a sophomore when he was in fact a freshman, but then talks about Bushnell and his studio, and they start doing painting together because Jack was also interested in being a painter. And through that, they end up getting 4 whole studios. One of the studios Lynch would get because of a deal with his dad, where his father Donald would pay for half the studio and Lynch would pay for another half that he would get for delivering prescriptions. This would lead to him biking through the suburbs in the middle of the night, understanding this creeping darkness behind everything, and that balance of darkness underneath all the serene beauty that would go on to color this romantic idea. It would come to fruition in later works. We'll talk about that in time. But for now, Jack Fisk, wife to Sissy Spacek, who was a famous actress, as you can see here, getting her own star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. This was in the mid-2000s, as, you know, seen by Lightning McQueen right here. But I digress. Sissy Spacek was his wife since 1974. And Spacek would even have some hand in Lynch's first feature-length film, Eraserhead. Besides that, Fisk would do some art direction on the films you see here, namely Carrie, which I haven't seen, but I know Sissy Spacek is the titular character. I have, however, seen Messiah of Evil, a gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous horror film that I recommend to anyone who loves horror or loves crazy set design, art design, and whatnot. I don't know this film over here near the right, Cool Breeze, but it's a blaxploitation film, and I found that very interesting. I didn't expect that sort of thing to be Jack Fisk's history. I just know that I will be checking it out sometime soon, because I do love the work Jack Fisk has done, and what work he has done is seen over here on the right. Excuse it being in the form of a letterbox screenshot, but we've got a couple Lynch films, Mulholland Drive and The Straight Story, also featuring Sissy Spacek. But we've also got Marty Supreme, his most recent work, which he would do in his late 70s, along with Killers of the Flower Moon. Yes, in fact, Jack Fisk is 80 years old. He was born all the way in 47? Yeah, or 1945. Yeah, 1945. Apologies. But he would be an art director for the first 8 production designer for the first 8 Terrence Malick pictures. Blech. What can I say? I don't have the best of budgets from my school. This is going to have to be in one take, and you'll have to all deal with that. We'll go on talking about how Jack Fisk would even direct a couple films of his own, starring Spacek in the lead roles. But besides that, we just know that Fisk would talk about Lynch a lot. He'd have a lot to say by being so close to him. In that, we have a quote. One day, he brought in a painting, all greens and blacks and thick with oil. Lynch would paint with oil at the time. And then this moth flew in and got stuck in the thick oil. It started flapping around, and it made this big spiral, the death of the moth. And from then, he put little bugs and stuff in his paintings. All sort of insects would go in his paintings. It'd be the start of his multimedia art. As you can see, we've got like literal matches. We've got lights. A real-life pine cone. A lot of interesting material to be used here in this painting called I Burn Pine Cone, Throw It in Your House. A lot of Lynch paintings would be named by the sorts of titles given in the paintings themselves. This is from his later career, by the way. This is the sort of art he was making at this point in his life. But it would be the point in his life where he would start his higher education. He would graduate from high school and go to his first art school, which would be the Boston Museum, School of the Boston Museum of Fine Arts. There we go. And there, he would find that his bunkmate would be a future famous musician, Peter Wolf. We've got a photo of him down here. And we've got a little bit of him right here. He would be the vocalist and produce a song with his band called Centerfold, which, if you don't already know, if you look it up, I bet you'll already have intuited the melody. It's everywhere. It's like cultural osmosis at this point. But the main point is he would be around Peter Wolf, and you honestly have a little drama with him. He would lose his bunkmate through his second time smoking weed. He would attend this Bob Dylan concert, and during the Bob Dylan concert, he would be very far away from Dylan and be sitting right next to his recent ex. And he started getting extremely paranoid and started just like thinking about how small Dylan was, and in the intermission would get so freaked out he up and left, which Peter Wolf found out about and then said, "Nobody walks out on Dylan," to which Dylan responds to which David responds with, "I walk out on Dylan. Now get the fuck out of here." And with that and a couple other incidents which people point to as being the breaking point between Lynch and this school would lead to him dropping out and kind of becoming directionless for a little bit, though he would hope to find a little bit of tutelage under Oskar Kokoschka, who is this Austrian painter we have a little self-portrait of, as well as a photo of him in his own little studio. This would be Lynch just around that time. It's kind of floaty. I don't have an exact date. The main point is, Lynch would fly out all the way to Salzburg with Fisk to try and learn from him. But the irony is Kokoschka had just flown out and wasn't able to receive them and do his class. So Lynch and Fisk, who were on this journey in Europe to try and find themselves in their vision, would try and stay there for 3 years, ultimately going to Greece to try and catch up with Lynch's at-the-time girlfriend. She also wasn't there in time, so they slowly became disillusioned with the idea, and were just like, you know what, we'll head back. Through this, Lynch has the ability to tell this story about him riding on a train, stopping, and finding a surreal scene with this man selling sugar water in different colored bottles, frog moths, and amazing like wind blowing everywhere. But I digress. You could find out about all of that in David Lynch Cook's Quinoa. At any point, you can wait until we cover it in our Inland Empire class, or if you're curious from just my little description, go ahead and check it out. It's really quite the story. My main point is this whole tutelage didn't work out, which maybe was a good thing. I know that David Lynch wasn't even really a fan of Kokoschka in the first place, but what happens is he comes back and he actually finds a school that's much more his style, and that's the Academy of the Fine Arts of Philadelphia. Well, like cats, am I right? The Academy of the Fine Arts in Pennsylvania, specifically in Philadelphia. Now, this is a school that he would actually finish his education at. This is a school that would take place in a town that was quite dreary and full of a lot of economic abandon because of the civil rights advances that were made in that town. There was a large black population, and they were not treated very kindly by the locals, especially resulting in sort of race tensions between the Ukrainians and the African American community. Lynch would witness a lot of upsetting things having to do with poverty, untreated mental illness. He would get mugged, he would get his car stolen, and ultimately be surrounded by a lot of upsetting things that would honestly influence his work. He would have a lot of bad things happen to him, and one would think he would be very upset by this sort of thing, but Lynch is actually very thankful for his time in Philadelphia because it would bring forward a lot of the sorts of things that would inspire his work coming forward. As I had mentioned earlier, his art would get darker, but it would take on the color of black, which he praised for being the color of dreams. There's a lot of things you can find in the black, a lot of ideas to be found that you're trying to make out that confirm a lot of things of the subconscious, ideas which Lynch would become increasingly obsessed with. And he would find himself really motivated by voices such as Francis Bacon, a famous painter in his own right, who has some really honestly scary works and abstracted figures. These two works, which would be called Untitled and Woman with Screaming Head, they'd be directly grabbed from the influences that Lynch was feeling from that sort of art. These were both in 1968 when Lynch was at that same school I had just mentioned. But I should also go on ahead and mention Rene Magritte and Edward Hopper as other key influences for Lynch. He talks about them in his own little interviews. I suggest you check that out if this side of Lynch's world interests you, because there's some really striking work here at play. When he finds his voice, he does things such as Man Throwing Up here on the left, and delves into sculpture, delves into all sorts of art that really pushes the boundaries, and later on, of course, would kickstart his work on making films. But here we can see what types of art he would create even towards the later parts of his career. I think this is from an exhibition called Big Bongo Night, touching on that bongo idea from earlier. We have this painting right here called Woman with Broken Neck and Electric Knife Speaks to Her Husband. We've got like photos that are used in the backgrounds of this photo right here and this other painting to the right that are like actually just grabbed and placed from other sources, and that would sort of come to be the ways of making art that Lynch would delve in. But all of this would not be as expressive and special to, his voice without the great city of Philadelphia and all of the horrors there within. Now, there was a really great opportunity that was made to bring Lynch into his first marriage, and that was his relationship to his first wife, Peggy Reevy. Now, they had already met in Boston when he was first attending school there, but they met up again in Philadelphia. When this all happened, Lynch would end up getting her pregnant, and they would get married to add on to the fact of them getting that child in the picture. I'll talk about that a little on the next slide, but I should mention all this comes about because Reevy is an artist in her own right. This 1970 drawing is of Lynch, as you can see, and this painting on the right is much more modern, from the 2010s, as it also depicts a surreal style. And we can see a lot of disturbing materials and ideas, and I actually recommend anyone who's interested in surrealist paintings to check out Peggy Reevy. A lot of her art deals with sort of sexual themes, which is increasingly interesting when we consider the material that would come about in the first feature of Lynch's, Eraserhead. Eraserhead would also be influenced by him having his first daughter at a very young age. This would be Jennifer Lynch, his first child of 4. Jennifer Lynch is honestly a director of her own different sorts of art after she worked as an assistant director on Blue Velvet, making films that would be a little unpopular, would be a little culturally unfavored, but this would be maligned by her being a Nepo baby, so to speak. The nepotism allegations were really fierce when her first film, Boxing Helena, came out. That isn't helped by the actress Sherilyn Fenn being a part of the picture, because Sherilyn Fenn had already been working with Lynch on his projects Twin Peaks and Wild at Heart. But there isn't just Boxing Helena. There's a lot of TV shows. She would work on Psych, The Walking Dead, Teen Wolf, Criminal Minds, American Horror Story, Daredevil, true crime such as Monster, The Jeffrey Dahmer Story, and The Watcher. All sorts of things in the directing sphere. And honestly, still doing a lot of work to this day. So even if I'm not a fan of that true crime stuff she's doing, good for her. I'm happy that someone such as Jennifer Lynch is doing her own thing, finding her own voice, despite her father's own direction that he took. But I'm reaching a point where we would have to talk about Lynch's short films, where he would take his paintings and think of moving paintings. And I'm finding that we're reaching the end of the painting side of his career. Of course, that wouldn't stop even until his passing, but we can see a little screenshot of him and his 4th child, Lula. He would also indulge in the arts as they paint together. It's really heartwarming knowing that he was a great father all the while. All of his children would be exposed to the arts in very direct ways, and they've all spoken very highly of him, and they should all be paid heed to, especially in Lynch's passing. So with that, I would like to wrap back around to the side of my story where I talked about Bushnell Keeler, because the first ever film, even before 6 Men Getting Sick, is a home movie. It's actually known as Sailing with Bushnell Keeler. I grabbed this film from Toby Keeler's YouTube channel, which you can see my credit for in our little bibliography section. And Toby Keeler uploads this with the description: in 1967, a young David Lynch grabbed his new Bolex 16mm camera to film his friend and mentor Bushnell Keeler and brother Dave Keeler sailing on the Chesapeake Bay in Bush's King's cruiser. This was David Lynch's very first film, which he prefers to call a home movie. It depicts a man, a painter, who changed David's life, forever pursuing the artist's life, which he continues to this day. With that, I leave you with this little home movie as the outro to our time today. Thank you so much for sticking around. I know it might be a little hard dealing with my rambling and rants as they're completely unscripted, but what am I to say? I'm just a humble teacher trying to spread the word of who has done a great number on my life, motivated me to be myself, and do things that express who I truly am. And to start with all of that, we've got a atmosphere building piece with little wind whooshing in the background that gives an idea of Lynch doing some work to encapsulate this day out, but adding some edge to it, adding a little bit of uneasiness. You'll see that just right now. But I must thank you once again and say, have a great day.